The holographic message materialized above Earth's United Defense Council chambers with the arrogance of 1,000 dying stars. Ambassador Velthara of the Galactic Tribute Syndicate stood 12 feet tall in shimmering projection, her crystalline exoskeleton catching light that didn't exist. Behind her, the assembled representatives of 47 star systems watched with the patient hunger of predators. Primitive world-designated Sol 3. Velthara's voice resonated through quantum frequencies that made the building's steel frame. Your species has achieved rudimentary faster-than-light capability. By Article 7 of the Galactic Accords, you are now subject to the tribute protocols. Director General Qasim Okafor leaned forward in his chair, his weathered hands steady despite the tremor of rage building in his chest. Around the circular table, representatives from every Earth nation watched the alien delegation with expressions ranging from awe to barely controlled fury. The terms are non-negotiable, the ambassador continued, her forearms gesturing to floating data streams. 60% of your planet's agricultural output, 40% of your refined metals, 30% of your population for labor. Conscription. Payment begins in your local measurement of 90 solar rotations. The chamber fell silent except for the soft whisper of recycled air. Velthara's compound eyes glittered with ancient satisfaction. In her species' long history of galactic expansion, she had delivered this same ultimatum to hundreds of worlds. Some pleaded, some wept, most simply bowed their heads and accepted the inevitable. None had ever laughed. But Fleet Admiral Nix Corvelli was laughing, a low, dangerous sound that started in her throat and built until it echoed off the chamber's walls. The other delegates turned to stare at the woman whose silver hair was pulled back in a severe knot, whose cybernetic left eye whirred softly as it focused on the projection. Something amuses you, primitive? Velthara's tone sharpened. Oh, absolutely. Corvelli stood, her hand resting casually on the plasma pistol at her hip. You want to know what's funny? You clearly haven't done your homework. She gestured to the massive displays surrounding the chamber, which suddenly blazed to life with tactical readouts, ship schematics, and stellar cartography data. See, most species you encounter probably developed FTL through some kind of peaceful, scientific breakthrough. Maybe they found ancient ruins, or had a nice chat with some benevolent aliens who shared the technology. The display shifted to show Earth's recent history, decades of warfare, technological arms races, and the brutal efficiency with which humanity had weaponized every discovery. We didn't get FTL from archaeology or diplomacy, Corvelli continued, her smile sharp as a blade. We got it by reverse engineering the wreckage of your scout ships, the ones that kept accidentally wandering into our system over the past 50 years. Velthara's crystalline features shifted, compound eyes narrowing. Impossible. Our vessels employ quantum stealth? Employed. Past tense. Director General Okafor stood beside Corvelli, his voice carrying the authority of a world united in purpose. We've been tracking your surveillance for decades, learning, preparing. The tactical displays zoomed out to show the Sol system, where hundreds of contacts suddenly materialized. Ships that had been hidden in asteroid fields, behind moons, in the shadow of Jupiter's radiation belts, each one bristling with weapons that represented humanity's greatest talent, turning tools into weapons and weapons into art forms. You see, Corvelli said, her cybernetic eye pulsing with targeting data. Your tribute protocols have a fundamental flaw. They assume the species, your extorting wants to live on its knees. She turned to face the alien delegation directly, and when she smiled, it was the expression of a predator that had just realized it was hungry. Humanity respectfully declines your offer. Consider this our counter-proposal. The human fleet began to move. The Galactic Tribute Syndicate's enforcement fleet dropped out of hyperspace 3 days later with the casual confidence of apex predators. 200 vessels of various configurations descended upon the Sol system like a metallic plague, their hulls gleaming with the accumulated wealth of 1,000 conquered worlds. Fleet Commander Zix Karn stood on the bridge of the dreadnought, harvester of worlds, his 6 arms working the tactical displays with practiced efficiency. His species, the Vorthak, had evolved from pack hunters on a high-gravity world, and their military doctrine reflected that heritage, overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. Scanning the primitive vessels, reported his sensor operator, a being whose name was an untranslatable sequence of harmonics. I count 412 human craft of various configurations, primitive fusion drives, crude armor plating, projectile weapons. Zix Karn's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. Projectile weapons, how charmingly ancient. He gestured with his primary arms toward the tactical display. Signal the fleet. Standard pacification pattern. Destroy half. Their vessels. Capture the rest for analysis. Leave their homeworld intact. Damaged livestock provide poor tribute. But as his fleet advanced in perfect formation, something was wrong. The human ships weren't fleeing or forming defensive clusters around their planet. Instead, they were moving outward in precise geometric patterns, as if they were... Fleet Commander, his tactical officer's voice carried a note of uncertainty. The human vessels they're surrounding us. Impossible. We have them outnumbered. 2-to-1, and our technology is... The first human ship died in a blaze of plasma fire, its hull splitting like an overripe fruit. But as it died, it continued firing, not at the Vorthak dreadnought that had killed it, but at something much smaller, a sensor probe. Then another human ship died, and another. But each one, in its final moments, targeted and destroyed critical sensor nodes, communication relays, and tactical coordination systems throughout the alien fleet. They're sacrificing themselves to blind us, Zix Karn realized with growing horror. Captain Ravi Delacroix watched his cruiser Mumbai's Vengeance shudder under the impact of enemy fire. Half his crew was already dead, his reactor was losing containment, and his ship's spine was twisted beyond repair. But his weapons were still online and his target was locked. All remaining power to forward batteries, he ordered his surviving crew. Make it count. The Mumbai's Vengeance died with its guns blazing, its final salvo tearing through the command bridge of a Galactic Syndicate destroyer. But more importantly, its sacrifice had positioned 3 more human vessels in perfect ambush positions. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. The humans fought with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural, each ship's destruction serving a greater tactical purpose. They used their own vessels as shields, as weapons, as decoys. They rammed enemy ships when their ammunition ran low. They overloaded their reactors and turned their vessels into improvised bombs. But most importantly, they fought without fear. Admiral Corvelli stood on the bridge of her flagship Indomitable, watching the tactical display with the cold satisfaction of a chess master executing a perfect gambit. Her ships were dying by the dozens, but each death revealed something new about the enemy, their blind spots, their communication protocols, their tactical doctrines. Phase 1 complete, she announced to her bridge crew. Enemy sensor network is down. Their command structure is in chaos. Signal the second wave. From behind Mercury's bulk, where they had been hidden in the star's radiation shadow, emerged humanity's true fleet. These weren't the crude vessels that had just fought and died. These were the products of 50 years of secret preparation. Ships built specifically to kill aliens, armed with weapons designed to exploit every weakness humanity had discovered in the enemy's technology. The Indomitable led them into battle, her hull scarred with the names of every human colony, every Earth city, every dream that had ever looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. Now they knew, and they were going to make the galaxy remember what happened when it tried to cage a predator. The Galactic Tribute Syndicate had never encountered anything like the human war machine that now tore through their ranks. Their databases contained tactical analyses of over 3,000 spacefaring species, but none of them had prepared their commanders for the sheer, relentless creativity of human violence. Vice Admiral Kareth Veldran commanded the Syndicate's elite subjugation corps from her flagship World's End, a vessel that had broken the spirit of 47 civilizations. Her species, the Ulthani, were masters of psychological warfare, experts at finding the breaking point of any opponent. But as she watched her fleet die around her, she realized that these humans might not have one. "Report!" she demanded, her telepathic voice lashing across the bridge crew's minds. "We've lost 37 vessels to what appear to be suicide." "Attacks, Vice Admiral," her tactical coordinator stammered. "The humans are using their own ships as guided munitions. They're ramming our vessels at near-light speed." "And their primary fleet?" "Closing fast. These new vessels, they're unlike anything in our databases. They appear to have been purpose-built for ship-to-ship combat." Kareth's compound eyes focused on the tactical display, where the human second wave approached like a pack of steel wolves. The lead vessel was massive, not as large as her dreadnought, but built with a predatory efficiency that made her ancestral hindbrain scream warnings. Captain Dmitry Kozlov had been born in the ruins of old Moscow, raised in the shadow of humanity's first interstellar wars. His grandfather had fought against the Chinese corporate states. His father had died in the Martian Independence War, and Dmitry himself had cut his teeth in the brutal asteroid mining conflicts that taught humanity how to fight in space. Now he commanded the heavy cruiser Stalingrad's Fury, and he was about to show these alien aristocrats what 3 generations of human warfare had produced. "Target their command ship," he ordered his weapons officer. "Full spread all tubes." The missiles that launched from his ship were not the crude projectiles the aliens expected. They were thinking machines, each one equipped with adaptive AI that learned from the battle data of its predecessors. They dodged point defense systems, adjusted their approach vectors in real time, and when they struck, they did so with mathematical precision designed to cause maximum structural damage. But more importantly, they were just the opening move. "Kozlov to all ships," he transmitted across the human fleet. "Doctrine 7. Show them what we learned from their scout ships." The human vessels suddenly shimmered and vanished from all. Sensors, their hulls wrapped in adapted quantum stealth technology. The aliens found themselves fighting ghosts that struck from impossible angles, then disappeared before return fire could find them. Vice Admiral Kareth felt the first stirrings of true fear as her tactical display became a nightmare of false contacts and phantom signatures. Her ships were firing blindly into empty space while invisible enemies carved them apart with surgical precision. "This is impossible," she broadcast to her fleet. "Their technology cannot match ours." Captain Kozlov's voice answered her across. The void transmitted on a frequency her sensors couldn't block. "You're right. Our technology can't match yours, but you made one critical error." The Stalingrad's Fury materialized directly above the World's End, close enough that the hull plating was visible through the viewport. Kareth stared up at the human ship and saw something that chilled her to the bone, the names of hundreds of human ships that had died in the first wave, etched into the armor plating like a memorial. "You assumed we were trying to match you," Kozlov continued. "We weren't. We were learning how to kill you." The human cruiser's main guns opened fire at point-blank range, and the World's End died in a cascade of secondary explosions. Across the battlefield, the pattern repeated. Human ships appeared from nowhere, struck with devastating precision, then vanished before the aliens could respond. They fought with a coordination that seemed impossible, until the alien survivors realized that every human ship was sharing tactical data in real time, creating a collective intelligence that adapted faster than any individual commander could respond. Admiral Corvelli watched the slaughter from her command center and felt no satisfaction, only the grim certainty that this was necessary. Earth had tried diplomacy, tried negotiation. The galaxy had responded with demands for slavery. Now they would learn what happened when you cornered humanity. "Signal the home fleet," she ordered. "Prepare Phase 3. In the outer system, where they had waited in the cold darkness beyond Pluto's orbit, humanity's true surprise began to move. These were not ships of war, but something far more dangerous. Ships of retribution, built around a single principle that every human understood in their bones. If you want to break a pack of wolves, you don't just fight them. You follow them home. The scattered remnants of the Galactic Tribute Syndicate's enforcement fleet limped away from Sol system in complete disarray. Of the 200 vessels that had arrived with such confidence, fewer than 30 survived to make the jump to hyperspace. But their retreat carried something more valuable than ships: intelligence that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Supreme Arbitrator Keth Malar received the battle reports in his crystalline palace on Nexus Prime, the Syndicate's capital world. His species, the ancient Kythera, had ruled the galaxy's economic systems for over 10,000 years through a combination of superior technology and overwhelming force. They had never encountered a species that could threaten their supremacy. Until now. "Impossible," Keth Malar whispered, his thoughts rippling through the quantum matrix that connected all Kythera minds. "No primitive species could have adapted our technology so quickly." His military advisor, General Vex Thari, stood before the throne with the bearing of a warrior who had witnessed something that challenged everything he believed. "Supreme Arbitrator, they didn't just adapt our technology, they improved it. Their stealth systems are superior to ours. Their weapons demonstrate a tactical flexibility we've never encountered. And their behavior? Unlike any species in our databases, they don't fight to survive. They fight to destroy. Complete, total destruction of their enemies appears to be their only acceptable victory condition." Keth Malar's crystalline features flickered with ancient fury. "Summon the War Council. We will mobilize the Grand Fleet. If these humans wish to play at war, they will learn why the galaxy has bowed to us for millennia." But even as he spoke, his sensor networks were screaming warnings across a dozen star systems. The humans were already coming. Captain Elena Vasquez commanded the stealth destroyer Guadalajara's Ghost, one of 50 ships that had followed the retreating alien fleet through hyperspace. Her mission was simple: gather intelligence on enemy positions, capabilities, and infrastructure. What she found was a target-rich environment that made her smile. "Tactical, confirm contact classification," she ordered her sensor operator. "Confirmed, Captain. Automated mining platform, Kepler 442 system. No defensive systems detected. Minimal crew. Appears to be mostly robotic operations." "Perfect. Weapons? Prepare surgical strike package. We're going to send a message." The mining platform that had extracted wealth from the Kepler system for over 2 centuries died in less than 30 seconds. But before it died, it transmitted detailed scans of human technology to every syndicate facility in the sector, exactly as Vasquez had intended. "Signal package transmitted, Captain," her communications officer reported. "They now have complete sensor data on our ship." "Excellent. Time to disappear." The Guadalajara's Ghost vanished into the void, leaving behind only wreckage and a message, burned into the asteroid where the mining platform had been anchored. Earth remembers. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. Human ships appeared at the edge of Syndicate space, struck isolated targets with devastating precision, then vanished. But these weren't random raids. They were a coordinated intelligence-gathering operation designed to map every critical system in the alien empire. Back on Earth, Admiral Corvelli stood before the Global Defense Council with holographic displays showing the galaxy's political structure. 50 years of careful observation had given humanity a complete understanding of how the Galactic Tribute Syndicate operated. The Syndicate controls over 400 star systems, she explained to the assembled world leaders. But their power structure is completely centralized. Everything flows through Nexus Prime, their capital, their command center, their economic hub. Director General Okafor studied the tactical projections with the eye of a strategist who had spent his career planning for this moment. You're proposing a direct assault on their homeworld. Not an assault, Corvelli corrected. A demonstration, she gestured, and the display shifted to show the Sol system's outer reaches, where massive construction projects had been hidden in the Kuiper Belt for decades. Shipyards the size of cities, manufacturing complexes that had transformed entire asteroids into weapons of war. The Syndicate believes they're facing a primitive species that got lucky. They're marshaling their grand fleet to crush us through. Overwhelming force. Traditional galactic warfare, massive formations, defensive positions, attrition-based tactics. And we're going to give them what they expect? Corvelli's smile was sharp as a blade. Oh, we're going to give them exactly what they expect. Right up until we don't. The displays changed again, showing fleet movements across the galaxy. The Syndicate was indeed mobilizing everything, thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds, all converging on Sol system for what they believed would be a final crushing blow against human resistance. Let them come, Director General Okafor said quietly. We'll be ready. But what he didn't say, what none of them said, was that humanity had learned something important from their first encounter with galactic civilization. The Syndicate wasn't just an enemy to be defeated. They were a system to be replaced, and humanity had very specific ideas about how the galaxy should be run. Supreme Arbitrator. Keth Malar stood on the bridge of his personal dreadnought Infinite, Dominion, watching the Grand Fleet assemble around him. 5,000 ships of every configuration, drawn from the military forces of 47 star systems. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. It would not be enough, but he wouldn't realize that until it was far too late. The Grand Fleet of the Galactic Tribute Syndicate entered Sol system like a metallic storm. 5,000. Ships arranged in formations that had conquered civilizations for 10 millennia. Supreme Arbitrator Keth Malar watched the tactical displays with satisfaction as his forces spread across the system in textbook deployment patterns, screening forces, main battle lines, and reserve formations positioned to deliver overwhelming firepower against any possible human response. Scan for enemy vessels, he commanded his sensor operators. These primitives showed cunning in their previous engagement, but against the full might of the Grand Fleet, they cannot hope to prevail. But the sensors found nothing. The asteroid fields were empty. The space around Earth showed only standard orbital traffic. Even the human homeworld itself seemed almost defensively naked, protected by nothing more than a handful of orbital platforms. This makes no tactical sense, muttered General Vexithari, studying the readouts with growing unease. Where is their fleet? Commander Hiroshi Nakamura watched the alien armada from his concealed position in Saturn's rings, his reconnaissance ship Tokyo's Vengeance wrapped in stealth fields that made it invisible to conventional sensors. Around him, hidden throughout the outer system, 300 human vessels waited in perfect silence. "Signal from Fleet Command," his communications officer whispered. "All units report ready." Nakamura nodded, his eyes fixed on the massive alien formation. The Syndicate had made their first critical error. They were fighting the last war, expecting humanity to meet them in conventional battle. Instead, they had walked into the most sophisticated ambush in military history. "Confirm firing solution on target package Alpha," he ordered his weapons officer. "One shot, then we go dark." The missile that launched from his ship was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Rather than a simple warhead, it was a delivery system for humanity's most carefully guarded secret, a weapon that turned the enemy's own technology against them. It struck the command Dreadnought Infinite Dominion and immediately began broadcasting, a signal across all Syndicate communication frequencies. Supreme Arbitrator Keth Mahler watched in horror as every display on his bridge suddenly filled with images of human faces. Not soldiers or leaders, but ordinary people. Children playing, in parks, families sharing meals, artists creating beauty from nothing, scientists pushing the boundaries of knowledge, and with each image came a voice, speaking in perfectly translated Kithara. This is what you demanded as tribute. These are the lives you tried to buy with fear. The transmission spread across the entire Grand Fleet, overriding all attempts to block it. Every alien warrior, every ship's crew, every soldier preparing for battle suddenly saw exactly what they were fighting for. Not abstract concepts of empire or duty, but the deliberate enslavement of an entire species. But the psychological warfare was just the beginning. Admiral Corvelli stood in the command center deep beneath Colorado's Rocky Mountains, watching the alien fleet's disposition with the cold satisfaction of a hunter who had perfectly predicted her prey's behavior. 50 years of preparation had led to this moment, and every element was proceeding exactly as planned. Outer perimeter reports ready, announced her tactical coordinator. Inner defense grid is active, orbital platforms are at full power. And our special guests? In position and awaiting orders. Corvelli nodded. The Galactic Tribute Syndicate was about to learn that humanity had spent half a century studying not just their technology, but their entire social structure. Every species they had conquered, every world they had enslaved, every population they had brutalized, all of it carefully catalogued and analyzed. "Signal to all units," she commanded. "Execute Order Spartacus." Across the alien fleet, something impossible began to happen. Ships started turning their weapons on each other, not in confusion or malfunction, but in deliberate rebellion. The Mai, Syndicate's slave soldiers, the conquered species forced to serve in their military, suddenly found themselves in possession of detailed intelligence about their oppressors' weaknesses. The humans hadn't just come to fight a war. They had come to start a revolution. Captain Zorthak of the heavy cruiser Chains of Binding felt something he hadn't experienced in 20 years of forced service. Hope. His species, the Veltar, had been conquered when he was barely more than a child. He had served the Syndicate because the alternative was the extermination of his people. But the human transmission had included something else. Detailed specifications for communication jammers that could block Syndicate control signals, weapon, modifications that could overcome their safeguards, and most importantly, the locations of every Veltar slave world in the galaxy. "Gunnery," he whispered to his weapons officer, another enslaved Veltar. "Target the command ship's communications array." "Sir, that would be justice." The Chains of Binding opened fire on the Syndicate command vessel, and across the fleet, dozens of other ships joined the rebellion. The Grand Fleet began tearing itself apart from within as species after species seized the opportunity to strike back at their oppressors. But even that wasn't humanity's final surprise. From the darkness beyond Pluto's orbit, the real human fleet finally revealed itself. Not the few hundred ships the aliens expected, but thousands of vessels that had been constructed in secret over 5 decades. Each one was a masterpiece of human engineering, designed around a single principle that the Syndicate had never encountered. Humanity didn't build ships to conquer others. They built ships to free others. "All vessels," Admiral Corvelli transmitted across the human fleet. "Remember our mission. We're not here to destroy an enemy. We're here to liberate a galaxy." The Battle of Sol began in earnest, but it wasn't the battle anyone expected. Instead of a clash between two military forces, it became something unprecedented in galactic history, a three-way conflict between oppressors, liberators, and the oppressed rising in revolt. Supreme Arbitrator Keth Mahler watched his grand fleet dissolve into chaos and felt the cold hand of destiny settling around his crystalline throat. For 10,000 years, the Kithara had ruled through fear and economic dominance. They had never imagined that someone might challenge not just their power, but the very concept of their rule. They were about to learn what happened when a sleeping giant finally decided to wake up. The war that followed would be remembered as the Awakening, 3 months of conflict that reshaped the political structure of the galaxy forever. But the real battle had been won in the first hour, when humanity proved that the galactic tribute, Syndicate's greatest weakness, wasn't their technology or tactics, but their fundamental assumption that oppression was sustainable. Fleet Admiral Nix Corvelli stood on the observation deck of her flagship Indomitable, now orbiting the shattered remains of Nexus Prime. The Syndicate's capital world hadn't been destroyed. Humanity had been very specific about that. Instead, it had been carefully occupied, its government apparatus dismantled piece by piece, its population liberated from 10 millennia of Kithara rule. "Final casualty reports, Admiral," her aide announced, approaching with a datapad that contained numbers that would have been unthinkable just months before. "Read them." Total human military losses: 412 vessels, 37,000 personnel. Enemy military losses: approximately 2,000 ships, unknown personnel, civilian casualties. None. Corvelli smiled, the expression carrying both satisfaction and exhaustion. For the first time in galactic history, a major interstellar war with 0 civilian casualties. It hadn't been easy. Humanity's doctrine of precise, surgical warfare had required incredible restraint and tactical brilliance. Every target had been military, every engagement planned to minimize collateral damage. They had fought a war of liberation, not conquest. The results spoke for themselves. Captain Dmitry Kozlov walked through the corridors of what had once been the Syndicate's primary slave processing facility on Kepler 438b. Now it was a refugee center, housing thousands of beings from dozens of species as they prepared to return to their home worlds that were free for the first time in centuries. "The Veltar delegation is ready for transport," reported Lieutenant Commander Santos, one of his officers. "Their homeworld achieved independence 2 weeks ago. They're eager to begin reconstruction." Kozlov nodded, watching as families that had been separated for decades were finally reunited. Children who had never seen their ancestral worlds prepared to walk on soil their grandparents could only dream of returning to. And the Kithara? The ones who chose exile are aboard the transport ships, heading for the Outer Rim territories. The ones who chose to remain are being integrated into the new governmental structures. Dr. Yeltsin says they're adapting well to democracy. It was perhaps the most radical element of humanity's approach to galactic politics. Rather than replacing one authoritarian system with another, they had introduced concepts that most alien species had never encountered: representative government, individual rights, economic systems based on cooperation rather than exploitation. The galaxy was learning to govern itself. Director General Kasim Okafor stood before the newly established Galactic Assembly on New Geneva Station, looking out at representatives from over 300 species. The facility had been built in the Sol system not as a symbol of human dominance, but as a demonstration of humanity's commitment to serving as facilitators rather than rulers. "The motion before us today," he announced to the assembled delegates, "concerns the establishment of trade routes between the former Syndicate core worlds and the Outer Rim territories. The floor recognizes the representative from the Altarian Commonwealth." The debate that followed would have been impossible under the old system, different species arguing freely about economic policy, military doctrine, and social programs. Democracy was messy, inefficient, and sometimes frustrating. It was also the only system that had ever worked for more than a few centuries without devolving into oppression. Admiral Corvelli found herself thinking about that as she prepared for her final official duty as Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces. The war was over, the galaxy was free, and humanity had proven something that most species considered impossible: that it was possible to wield overwhelming military power without becoming corrupted by it. But the hardest test was yet to come. "Ma'am," her aide approached with the ceremonial document that would officially dissolve the wartime command structure. "The Global Defense Council is ready for your final briefing." Corvelli took the document and walked to the podium where she had once announced humanity's refusal to pay tribute to alien overlords. Now she would announce something even more radical: humanity's refusal to become overlords themselves. "Fellow citizens of Earth," she began, her words broadcast across the planet and throughout the galaxy. "Today marks the end of the Terran Defense Forces as a centralized military command. Our ships will be transferred to the new galactic peacekeeping service. Our personnel will be integrated into the Multi-Species Defense Corps, and our technology will be shared freely with all member worlds of the Galactic Assembly." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Protests from those who believed humanity deserved to rule the galaxy they had liberated. Cheers from those who understood that true victory meant making themselves obsolete. "We did not fight this war to become the new masters of the galaxy," Corvelli continued. "We fought it to ensure that no one would ever again have the power to demand tribute from free peoples. That mission is complete. What happens next is up to all of us, human and alien alike." She set down the ceremonial dissolution order and smiled. "The galaxy asked for tribute from Earth. We answered with armed vessels. But our greatest weapon was never our ships or our guns. It was our refusal to accept that freedom was negotiable. That refusal is now part of galactic law, encoded in the Constitution of the new Assembly. No species will ever again bow to demands for tribute." 1 year later, Captain Elena Vasquez commanded the exploration vessel New Horizons, part of a joint human-alien crew surveying uncharted systems beyond the former Syndicate borders. Her mission was peaceful: to seek out new civilizations and offer them membership in the Galactic Assembly as equals rather than subjects. It was, she reflected, a much better job than hunting alien oppressors. But sometimes, late at night during Nadda, the long voyages between stars, she would remember the moment when humanity had looked up at the galaxy and declared its refusal to kneel. That moment had changed everything, not just for Earth, but for every world that had ever dreamed of freedom. The galaxy had asked for tribute. Humanity had answered with something much more dangerous than armed vessels. They had answered with an idea that all beings had the right to determine their own destiny, and ideas once released could never be conquered.